Here is a scenario that plays out in every gym in the world, every year. A person trains seriously for 2 years, builds real strength and real muscle, and then life intervenes. An injury, a job, a child, a decade. The training stops. The muscle goes, pound by pound, until the person in the mirror is a stranger with loose sleeves. And the story they tell themselves is the cruelest one available. I lost it all. I am starting from zero. I wasted those 2 years. Today we break down why that story is biologically false, what actually remains inside the muscle fiber after the detraining, what the nervous system keeps in its own separate archive, and why the second run at fitness is always faster than the first. We will also visit the strange psychology of the comeback, the museum in the closet, the shame that outlives the atrophy, and the sentence at the end of this video that every 10-year quitter needs to hear exactly once, and then never needs to hear again, because it rewrites the entire contract between them and the gym. This is the psychology and the physiology of muscle memory, and by the end of it, the word setback will mean something different to you. Because the story you tell about a layoff determines whether you return, and the story most people tell is biologically false, and the falseness is not a small error. It is the single biggest reason people who were once strong spend the rest of their lives never touching a barbell again, and it is built entirely on a misunderstanding of what the body keeps and what it lets go. And today we correct the ledger. Start with the discovery, because it is one of the great plot twists in exercise science. For decades, the textbook model of muscle was simple. Nuclei inside a muscle fiber are fixed. Training causes the fiber to grow, and the existing nuclei govern the larger volume. When training stops, the fiber shrinks, and the assumption was that the acquired adaptations shrink away with the size. The story of how the discovery was made deserves a sentence, because it is one of the quiet triumphs of modern exercise science. The Gunderson group in Oslo did not set out to prove muscle memory. They were studying how muscle fibers respond to overload, using time-lapse imaging that let them watch the same living fibers across weeks, a technique most of the field had not bothered to scale to this question. When the loading stopped and the fibers shrank, the textbook said the extra nuclei should disappear with the size. The imaging kept showing them staying. Month after month, in the shrunken fibers, the acquired workforce sat waiting, and the team, to their credit, followed the anomaly instead of the textbook, and published what the fibers actually did rather than what the model predicted. When a muscle was loaded, it acquired new nuclei, and these nuclei were not lost during detraining. The fiber shrank. The nuclei stayed. Months later, in some observations over very long windows, the nuclei were still there, sitting inside the smaller fiber-like crew aboard a ship that had been mothballed but never decommissioned. Why does this matter? Because nuclei are the machinery of protein synthesis. They are the factories that build the muscle back. An untrained fiber has a fixed number of factories. A trained fiber that has detrained still has the expanded workforce, dormant, waiting, and when the loading resumes, the workforce activates, and the rebuilding proceeds at a rate the first-time novice cannot touch. The lifter coming back is not knocking on doors and hiring. He is ringing a bell in a factory where everyone still has a desk. The practical difference shows up in the timeline. The first-time lifter spends his initial months building the infrastructure before the visible growth arrives, which is why beginners quit in week 6, because the mirror shows nothing while the body builds the workforce silently underneath. The returning lifter skips that entire phase. The workforce is standing, the machinery is grooved, the nervous system pathways are carved from the old years, and the first weeks back produce changes that took months the first time. Every veteran who has ever returned describes the same disbelief. It is coming back faster than it came. It is coming back faster than it came because it never actually left, and the speed is not motivation. It is head count, and the muscle is only half of what the body remembers. The nervous system keeps its own archive, and the archive is even more durable. Strength, in the early weeks of any training program, is mostly a neural phenomenon, the brain relearning to recruit what it already owns, the coordination of a squat, the timing of a pull, the bracing pattern under load. The motor learning literature describes these adaptations with the same patience the myonuclei literature describes the fibers. The patterns are grooved, and grooved patterns survive disuse far longer than the muscle size that expressed them. This is why the returning lifter feels strangely at home under the bar in week 1. The movement is familiar in the hands and the hips before it is familiar in the mirror, the body remembering a language the conscious mind half forgot, and the first sessions run on the archive. The muscle follows the signal, and the signal, it turns out, was never lost either. This is the double inheritance of the returning lifter, the fiber and the pathway, the factory and the roads leading to it, and the first-time lifter owns neither, which is why the first 6 months of a novice program feel like construction, and the first 6 weeks of a comeback feel like reunion. And the difference between those two experiences, construction and reunion, is the entire biological argument of this video in 2 words. Here is the analogy. First-time training is building a factory in an empty field. Slow, expensive, permits, foundations, weather. Rebuilding after a layoff is walking back into the factory you built, dusting off the machines and turning the power on. The field did not get easier. You still own the factory. And unlike factories, muscle fiber workforce does not get repossessed on anything like the schedule anyone feared. The exact duration of the retention is still being studied, and honest science says the windows vary, and the honest caveat deserves its own sentence, so that this channel stays on the right side of the evidence. What the science firmly supports is the direction, the persistence, the mechanism. What it does not promise is a specific guarantee for any specific layoff length, and anyone selling you a precise number is selling something the literature has not settled. The direction is enough. The direction says the second run is faster, the workforce persists, and the shame is running on outdated information. But the direction of the finding has held and been extended across the literature, including the 2024 review in the Journal of Physiology, which consolidated the evidence for long-term transcriptional regulation after strength training. What you built is protected far longer than the mirror suggests. Now the psychology, because the physiology is only half the story. The bigger problem with layoffs is not the atrophy, it is the narrative. The returning lifter believes he is starting from zero, and starting from zero is demoralizing in a way that starting from a head start never is. The quit that lasts 10 years is rarely about the muscle, it is about the shame of the muscle, the story that says the whole previous effort was erased, so why begin again? Psychologists who study self-forgiveness describe exactly this loop, the refusal to return to a domain where a perceived failure occurred, not because the domain is closed, but because returning would require facing the evidence of the interruption. The gym bag in the closet, unzipped for years, functions as a museum of the self that was, and the museum is easier to keep closed than to renovate. The muscle memory research hands you the renovation permit. The self that was is not in the museum. It is in the fiber, alive, staffed, waiting, and the renovation is cheaper than the closure ever was, and the proof is biological, not motivational. The muscle memory research hands you a factual counter-argument to that shame. Nothing was erased. The workforce is aboard. The factory is standing. The only thing that dissolved was the output, and output is the fastest thing to rebuild, because the infrastructure was never lost. And the identity layer from Anderson and Psychosh, the exercise identity research, predicts exactly this. The person who trained seriously for 2 years is not a novice with a novice nervous system. He is a lifter on a layoff, with an identity in the vault, movement patterns groove deep, gym literacy intact, and a brain that has already solved the habit once. Every system the first-timer builds from scratch, the returning lifter is merely reactivating. The research on habit formation, remember Lally and the 66 days to automaticity, describes the first run. The second run is faster, in practice, anecdotally, for everyone who has ever done it, because the pathways are carved, not cut fresh. The habit literature describes automaticity as a curve, steep at the start, flattening as the behavior becomes default. What the returning lifter discovers is that the curve has memory too. The 66 days the first time becomes something closer to 20 or 30 the second time, because the cue, the routine, and the reward are all known quantities to a nervous system that has run the loop before, and the reassembly is a matter of dusting off rather than constructing. This is why the most dangerous sentence in fitness is not "I quit." It is "I quit, so it does not matter now." The first sentence describes a pause. The second describes a false premise, and the false premise is what actually costs people their decade. So here is the reframe. The video exists to hand you. There is no such thing as starting over in training. There is only resuming, and resuming is cheaper, faster, and more certain than beginning, every time, because the biology is on your side in a way, the fitness industry, which profits from your belief that you lost everything, will never put on a poster. The layoff took the mirror. It did not take the factory. And there is one more finding from the muscle memory literature that deserves its own paragraph, because it removes the final excuse. The research, including the follow-up work on detraining windows, suggests the retention is long, far longer than anyone intuitively believes, with nuclei persisting across very extended detraining periods in the observed studies. The honest scientific caveat is that exact windows vary and research continues, but the direction has held across a decade of replication and review, including the 2024 consolidation in the Journal of Physiology. The workforce does not evaporate on the schedule of your guilt. It waits, in the shrunken fiber, with a patience the fitness industry has never had a reason to tell you about, because an industry that sells first times has no product line for returns, which is why you have never seen this research on a poster, and why the most hopeful finding in exercise science has spent 20 years as a footnote instead of a headline. One more piece of arithmetic for the person adding up the years. The returning lifter does not just inherit the fiber and the pathway, he inherits the entire education. He knows how to warm up, how to read his body, how to load a bar, how to fail safely, how to eat around training, how to spot the charlatans and the programs designed for other people. The first-time novice spends a year learning those lessons through soreness and mistakes. The returning lifter carries them as native language. When you add the education to the fiber and the pathway, the comeback is not merely faster than the first run. It is safer, smarter, and better programmed because the person returning is not the person who left. The person returning is the person the first run built, and that person never stopped existing either. If you are in the layoff right now, hearing this, the door of the factory is exactly where you left it, and the crew has been waiting, without complaint, without overtime, without a single demand, for however long it has been, and the only thing they need from you is the bell, and the bell is a session, and the session is 20 minutes, and 20 minutes from now the decade starts ending. The first week back will feel like a reunion with an old friend who never changed. Which was your longest layoff? And what surprised you about coming back? Tell me in the comments and be specific, because I read them, and someone in the middle of a 10-year quit needs to read your number. Hit like if this landed, and subscribe for the next breakdown. Goodbye, and see you next time.